Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Rise and Shine, and let's get straight into our conversation, as I mentioned, with Martin George, attorney at law. He's with us virtually. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, hi, good morning to you, Mr. Cox, and good morning to all of Tobago and all your listeners everywhere around the world. I understand your listenership base and your viewership base is expanding every day. I understand you all were the hit at Caribana in Toronto. You all were the hit at Crop in Barbados. Everybody was tuning into you. So keep up the good work.
And of course, you keep up the good work with your commentary as well. And we appreciate you being here this morning. Let's get straight into it, Mr. George. Now, 19 murders, of course, unheard of in Tobago. We heard the chief secretary over the weekend saying that he got the assurances from the top level at the TTPS that they are pursuing meaningful intelligence-driven pursuits, more or less. But he's reminding them that, hey, Tobagonians are running out of patience. Let's start from there. We as a society, we're not accustomed to this. What in your view is really transpiring here?
Well, the thing is, this is a reflection of the failure over the years to, first of all, acknowledge that we are facing a growing crisis in Tobago when it comes to crime and criminality. We have slowly gotten accustomed, Mr. Cox, to, the levels of violence and crime increasing. I am hoping we don't reach to the point where we become numb and dumb so that we're not even affected by it anymore, that we think it's the norm. This cannot become the norm for Tobago. We have to really take a stand against it, and we have to do so now. Because if you recall, the author Malcolm Gladwell in his book, The Tipping Point, he says in the course of events, there comes a point where it's basically like your point of no return. And that's what is called the tipping point. So in other words, if we get to that and we cross that Rubicon, there's really no turning back. You'll end up like Lot's wife. You'll be turned into a pillar of salt. So we have to recognize that we are galloping towards the edge of a precipice here in Tobago. And if we don't pull back the reins, pull back the horses, we are all going to go over that edge. And, there is so much at stake here in this scenario. And I hope Tobagonians understand what is involved here. Because if we are primarily a tourism-based economy, let's face it, nobody is going to pack up their bags and pack their families and spend money and look for a flight and hotel accommodation for an island that is, listed as a murderous little place. Nobody wants to go to that kind of, environment. So we have to understand what this is doing to our image. Every time you see one of these travel advisories issued by the USA, by the UK, by Canada, it hurts us, it affects us. And let's understand the competitive nature of the tourist industry. What occurs up the islands is the other smaller islands that we are competing with for these international tourists. They highlight the fact that Tobago is on a crime wave. They highlight that on their newspapers. They highlight the fact that TNT is listed as a dangerous, violent place. Because you know what? They figure, well, if they highlight that, then people will say, look, let's choose an alternative destination, and they may get the business instead. So that is exactly how serious this scenario is. And we need to understand that and recognize that, look, this is something that has to stop. Tobagonians need to wake up and shake up, Mr. Cox. They cannot afford to be apathetic or feel, well, this is gang related, so it doesn't affect me. It does. It affects all of us. In fact, we've seen in some of the shootings that occurred earlier this year, there were innocent bystanders who also got shot. So don't say it's not affecting you, right? It's affecting your tourism, it's affecting your economy, it's affecting your children, your young people. So let's not, adopt this hands-off approach and say, well, I not involved, so therefore, I couldn't be bothered. We have to be bothered. We have to care.
Okay, and Mr. George, now, before I move on to my planned question for you, you mentioned the travel advisories and so on. They don't necessarily detail that this is a gang-related activity or this is domestic. They don't go into those details. But apart from us pushing back against the crime, how do we manage that type of branding going out into the space? Is it beyond our control?
Well, the thing is, you see, I mean, it's a fine line you're walking because, yes, you can reach out to the embassies and stuff like that. But if it is that the advisory is coming from, say, for instance, the Department of Homeland Security in the US or the Home Office in the UK, then even the US ambassador here in TNT can do very little to change that. The High Commissioner, the British High Commissioner here in TNT can do very little to change that. So it's something that you basically have little control over, even on a government to government level. If it is that this is what their intelligence sources dictate and this is the result that they have found, it's hard to get them to change that. So what we have to do is basically change ourselves. I mean, it's not fair. I agree. And I have spoken out against them, repeatedly because I say, look, you look at how many mass shootings have occurred in the US for the year so far. I mean, they should hardly be the ones to point fingers. But the reality is they do it as a precaution to their citizens, telling them, well, hey, look, these are the hotspot areas around the world, so be careful. And unfortunately, we are on the list. So, I mean, complaining about it and railing against it is not going to change that. We have to start changing ourselves. And we have to change not just for the travel advisory sake, we have to change for our own sake. Don't we want Tobago to get back to being the nice, quiet, scenic, peaceful place it always was that we knew growing up? Don't we want to get back to being, free and relaxed without beginning to, have to kind of wander in Tobago? Well, hey, I wonder that car, that coming there. I wonder who in that car and what they're up to. No, we have to recognize, Mr. Cox, we're facing a crisis. And, I mean, you mentioned the police intelligence-driven strategies. And, I mean, I have, supported the police in terms of, from the chamber's perspective, the Tobago Business Chamber. I've supported as a commissioner on the, Police Service Commission. I've supported as a director of Crime Stoppers. But then sometimes you see some absurdities from the TTPS, like them issuing a statement, a few days ago that, they are on the lookout to go and arrest somebody who was allegedly, performing some obia ritual in relation to licensing officers. How on earth is that solving crime or fighting crime when you have murder and mayhem taking place? Is that your priority as the TTPS? So, you see, the thing is, they then say, well, they want the help of the public. But when you alienate yourself from the public by such palpable absurdities, how you expect the same public then to come back and say, well, yeah, we're working alongside with you, when you are, devoting time and resources to such frivolities and follies?
Interesting there. And I heard you made comment to that earlier this week, or sometime last week. But in terms of the legalities of having, one, joint forces on the ground, going about doing their investigations, but more than that, the level of force, where is the threshold for the protective services in terms of exercising a certain level of force to really push back? I mean, the island is not accustomed to military-style type of policing or even the involvement of soldiers, but can that happen? And how much can they exercise that kind of force, Mr. George?
Well, remember when you're talking about the army and you're talking about soldiers, remember they have very limited jurisdiction in terms of police powers and powers of arrest and that sort of thing. So, they could probably, patrol alongside police officers, but they don't have the same powers as police officers. In terms of bringing police officers from Trinidad, well, I mean, of course, the TTPS is the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, so you could deploy your police officers wherever. So some of the silly comments you've seen, of persons saying, "Well, they're bringing up Trinidad Police." There's no such thing as Trinidad Police and Tobago Police. You have police divisions all across TNT, and the commissioner is entitled to deploy whichever officer wherever she sees fit. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that aspect of it. And in fact, I think sometimes maybe the rotation may be good, because you could sometimes end up in a scenario where familiarity breeds contempt. So therefore, that closeness where if it is a Tobago born and Tobago bred police officer from the same village and he knows everybody, sometimes he may be put in difficult situations. It might be a family member, a friend, a relative, or somebody, say, "Boy, I'll get the boy a blind, or you go up with him," that. So you want to avoid putting yourself in that type of compromising situation. So therefore, if you have somebody who is a stranger, a police officer who doesn't know the community, who, he is not at least under that type of, familiarity with them to be able to, be subject to that type of pressure. Of course, the flip side to that is, if it is that he's coming in as a total stranger, then persons may clam up and may not want to share information with that officer because they feel, well, we don't know who this person is, we can't trust him, right? So that's where I mentioned the Crime Stoppers hotline, the 800 tips. And I urge Tobagonians to make use of that line. It is secure, it is anonymous, it is safe, it is 1,000% effective. You can call in your tips on that hotline number, 800 tips. I'm saying it again and again. And you have the chance of getting a reward. Nobody will know your identity. There's no caller ID. There's no question as to who you are. When you call in to give your information, you are just assigned a case number. So nobody knows your name. So therefore, when you call back to follow up on your tip, you just give that case number. And they will then say, well, okay, yes, we followed up on your tip was successful, you could get a reward. To get the reward, you go to the bank. We have an arrangement with Scotia Bank whereby you go in, you just give that same case number to the operations manager, and you get your reward. Nobody asks you, and you don't even have to produce ID, nothing whatsoever to get your reward. Our rewards start at $1,000 and go up from there. So, I mean, it's something that definitely I urge the public to utilize as an alternative. If it is that there is the feeling that they can't trust the police to go to them directly with the information, use the Crime Stoppers hotline.
Okay. Mr. George, persons are saying, when you make the argument about fighting crime, persons obviously would see the murder rate and would comment based on the murder rate. Police are also judged based on the murder rate, but serious crimes occur with regards to the involvement of guns and ammunitions. But the business of crime is also a big thing, and treating with that. Now, does the FIU come into play? Who really treats with, or what is the approach, in your view, the police should take in terms of clamping down on the whole business aspect of things? Because when we talk in business, I mean, yes, the man on the ground would ply his trade illegally, and that would be considered business. But also the man at the very top would also be part of this business ecosystem. What is the approach the police should really take? Because clearly the business of crime is alive and well in Tobago.
Yes, it is. It is. But in terms of the FIU, all right, what I would tell you is that, I mean, once you talk in FIU, you're talking, I mean, at a certain level. And I'm not sure that Tobago necessarily has that number of businesses operating at that kind of scope or capacity to attract any major attention from the FIU in that regard. I mean, of course, realtors, attorneys, accountants, etc. You all have to subscribe to, the principles and guidelines of the FIU. You have to register, etc. But beyond that, if it is that you're talking major crime, which would be, you're talking essentially the major money laundering aspect of it. I think their focus is primarily the large businesses in Trinidad who can easily absorb and therefore disguise, sums of money in the millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions. So, I mean, there are not many businesses in Tobago with that kind of turnover. Let's be realistic. So in terms of the FIU, I don't see that as having any major impact on the scenario in Tobago. What we are seeing developing in Tobago is you are seeing the development of drug blocks. You're seeing the development of, robberies, robbing a Playway boot, a Lotto boot, robbing a supermarket, a mini mart, that kind of thing. We are seeing those kinds of things, and those have nothing to do with FIU. So we need to understand the source and genesis of it, which is the fact that illegal guns are freely available throughout Tobago. So therefore now you go back, you trace back, okay, where are these illegal guns coming from, right? You think in terms of the airport. The airports authority, by and large, has their system pretty well, they run a pretty tight ship. So there can't be any large inflow of illegal arms and ammunition coming through the airport. So therefore, it leaves only one major source, which is the sea ferry. We have to understand that. That is where it's at. I heard you mention the issue of vehicle scanners, and that's something I have been harping on for, I think, decades. Honestly, Mr. Cox, I think it's decades I've been harping on that because I point out the absurdity of the Port Authority scanning an individual walking onto the boat. So you have a little knapsack, a little laptop bag, they're scanning you. Metal detector, you have to walk through that, right? To make sure you're not carrying any illegal guns. But yet still somebody could drive on with a van load of guns and all they do is a cursory, open your trunk, let me see, they poke around a little bit. But it's not any major search because, I mean, practically, if they were to do an intensive search, then the ferry will never sail, because of the number of vehicles. So the scanner is where it comes in, and therefore you drive through the scanner, right? It's a huge machine. And the scan is done as you go. So in other words, bam, you drive through, right? They're looking at it on a screen the same way when you walk through scanner. Once they see it, they then say, okay, pull that vehicle aside. We're going to do an extensive search on that one. And the others continue driving through. Once the others drive through and they see nothing suspicious in them, then of course they're allowed to go on board the boat. So the thing is, the mobile vehicle scanner is really essential. In addition to which, there are many things the TTPS can do. I have said repeatedly, they ought to have a list of all the wanted persons, all the people who have outstanding warrants, who they're looking to arrest. And they're supposed to have undercover officers on each and every sailing of the ferry, going up, coming back down. You're supposed to have undercover officers, maybe about 5 or 10, just casually scanning the crowd, right? You have your list, you have your pictures, you see, but that guy, of course, there looks like somebody. We have a warrant for him from Maruga Station, right? As the gentleman is trying to exit the boat, you just hold him and you have a conversation with him, So you could eliminate part of the problem, because they keep saying that, well, is gangs coming up from Trinidad or gang leaders or gang members. But if you could stop them there on the ferry, if it is that you have outstanding warrants or you want them for questioning or invest, then G's and H's, just do it there and then. Don't wait till they come and they settle and they get into, whatever activities they want to do. And then next thing, things escalate and you have another murder. And then Tobago is being tarnished for it because it's been recorded as a murder in Tobago. And that's where I'm saying the TTPS has fallen down. They are not being proactive at all. So they come and they talk all these nice things and they say, oh, well, we have our strategies and, we can't reveal to the public what we're doing. But good heavens, basic things like this, you should be doing and you're not doing it. So therefore, clearly, this is a failure on your part. So
And
if it is that they could now come and tell us that this latest murder victim, Dolly Boss, was a gang member, then my question to you is, if you know all of that, then shouldn't you have known that, hey, listen, Dolly Boss was on this flight or this boat or whatever, and she came to Tobago, she landed at so she was staying. Why aren't you doing your work and either monitoring or seeking to prevent any scenario occurring with somebody like that? And that's my point, So, after the fact, they come with all these nice theories about, well, this one was a gang member and this one was not the intended target. It was something. Oh, yeah, all of that, and you can't arrest and lock up anybody. Come on. So, we support the TTPS in their efforts, but we also have to hold them to account and say, hey, listen, you're not doing enough. You're not doing a good job. Sorry to say.
Mr. George, I would hope that the situation is not so bad that the gang violence are being allowed to pan out itself, because naturally it's not good when bystanders are being grazed. It's not even good when a human being is losing a life. So I hear that interesting point.
We had a quadruple murder in Tobago. I am still in shock over that. If you understand me, So we have to recognize what is happening. Because the point is, if people are driving around with high-powered assault rifles, AK-47s, right, AR-15s, Uzis, then you're talking about a really serious situation, and we need to understand and recognize that, look, some of it is being perpetrated by some of our own homegrown criminals. That's another reality that we have to look at in Tobago. We can't keep pointing fingers and saying, well, it's only Trinidadians. No, some of our own young people are being roped in and they are involved.
And Mr.
And we
George,
have to recognize that and deal with that.
Mr. George, and thank you for that point there, but in terms of the Anti-Gang Act, where does that fit in it? Of course, someone who is identified as a gang leader, someone who is coercing someone to get involved in a gang member, even if a police officer is in a gang, I'm just listing just a few that falls under the Anti-Gang Act. Where does that play, and how can that be efficiently utilized with dealing with the level of gang violence?
Well, I will tell you that that's a question you should pose to the police the next time they come on your show, because all the legislation is there. And interestingly enough, you hear from the TTPS, well, yes, we know that there are so many gangs here and so many gangs there, and this one is a gang leader and this one is a... So then if you know all of that, why on earth are you not arresting them, using the legislation under the Anti-Gang Act and arresting them and charging them? But they could tell us all the things about, well, oh yes, but it's the other gang member who wanted revenge on this gang member, and they keep talking, and it's just a whole lot of empty rhetoric. It's like, the Bible says empty vessels make the most noise. And that's what it sounds like from the TTPS, because they keep talking all of this. They've gotten the legislation that they argued for, right? It's there in the books, but yet still you're not hearing any great number of arrests or charges being laid in terms of persons under the Anti-Gang Act. In fairness to them, this individual who was shot in St. Martin recently, Plumpy Boss, I think he was charged under the Anti-Gang Act, and I think one of the leaders of the Sixth Gang was also charged under the Anti-Gang Act. But the point is, those are two examples, but the thing is, if you are coming out and telling us, well, this other one and that other one and this next one were all members of gangs, then our question is, why are you not charging them also? So, Mr. Cox, it's really been an interesting morning, but, unfortunately, I have another engagement I need to head off to. So it's always a pleasure chatting with you guys on the show, And I have to thank you, for this opportunity to, discuss ideas. And, I mean, I just want to make it clear, when I appear on these shows, Mr. Cox, it's just basically to, ask people to think for themselves, So I toss out ideas, I toss out suggestions. It doesn't mean you have to agree with me. It doesn't mean I am right and you are wrong, or you are right and I am wrong. All it means is that we are trying to elevate the level of discussion, the level of discourse, so that we can come together, put our heads together to find meaningful and workable solutions for a better and brighter future for all of Tobago.
Thank you very much, Mr. George, for joining us this morning. As per usual, we can more or less call you a resident commentator if you accept. But thank you again for being with us this morning. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying with us as well. We're going to take a short break. And when we return, we should be having a conversation with the Trinidad and Tobago Blind Welfare Association. Stay tuned.